Thank you all for joining us. We are here to discuss the critical conversation where we will focus on cybersecurity challenges faced by HBCUs, community colleges, and state colleges. Whether you are here as a part of one of those educational institutions or have a vested interest in cybersecurity, you are in the right place. To kick things off, I'll introduce myself. My name is Brandon Johnson. I am a customer trainer for business and education for the Microsoft Dallas Hub training team. And I'm also a proud HBCU graduate from Central State University located in Wilberforce, Ohio. So I will be a facilitator for today, and I'll also be focused on keeping an eye on the Q&A section. That way, any questions, comments, or concerns that you all have, I'll be able to give you feedback or pass it over to our panelists. So we do have a jam-packed event for you all once again that will not disappoint. And I will do a brief introduction to each of our panelists before we kick it off to our first speaker. Joining me today, we have from Safe PC, we have Medina Ali. We also have joining us from Microsoft, we have Corey Lee. And last but not least, joining us from Fortinet, we have Mike Lauer. So I am going to kick things off by passing it over to Medina, and we will start with today's session.
Thank you, Brandon, for the introduction. Again, this webinar is so unique that we're focusing on the cybersecurity challenges in higher education, but special emphasis to the HBCUs, community colleges, and state universities. And both my partners, Microsoft and Fortinet, we have come together in this partnership to offer the resources and the solutions that we strongly feel higher education needs to take benefits of. Next slide. The agenda, we're going to talk about, and I just mentioned it briefly, why we are here today. We have a new normal. Ever since the pandemic, we now have faculty and students getting educated from home. Some have come back into the dorms. Some people have come back to the university, but at the same time, people now want the flexibility to work from home. So we're going to talk about those challenges and how it has posed a threat to cybersecurity. Focus on the priorities, focus on cybersecurity for education. We're going to talk about the power of Microsoft 365 and the Surface, as well as secure OEM devices. Talk about every security journey is different. Talk about Kent State University, which was a particular cybersecurity case study. Talk about some of the benefits, such as the Microsoft security training, complementary security assessment, access to funds that a lot of the HBCU minority serving community colleges should try to get, that focuses on infrastructure, broadband, and cybersecurity solutions. And then, of course, we're going to have a Q&A session as well. Again, my name is Medina Ali. I'm the president and CEO of Safe PC Solutions. We are a Microsoft partner focused on the IT security and cybersecurity ecosystem. We also have Fortinet, which has been a wonderful partnership we've had for the past year, that has helped us with securing networks for our clients. And we're going to get in further on their complementary security assessment programs as well. So again, Brandon Johnson, who kicked off as the facilitator, who you just met earlier, and then of course I introduced all the panelists. So in this particular slide, right now, as you can see, education is the most affected industry when it comes to malware encounters in the last 30 days. 80% of the devices with malware encounters detected over the 30 days are in education. Retail and consumer goods are second, then followed by healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and then telecommunications, financial services, and insurance. power, and utilities. And there are several reasons why the industry is being affected. A large part is because the industry, due to the pandemic, was so disrupted where overnight you had to, if you wanted to continue learning, you had to do everything remote based. And so you were not on, you had to log in through the VPN to get to the school network. However, a lot of security and a lot of the, things were just, they were just not prepared to handle all of the malware and all of the ransomware issues. Next slide. So again, why were we here today? Just it was the end of December 2021. Lincoln College, an historically Black college university in Missouri, actually had to shut down. And it was based on a ransomware attack. And what we realized was a lot of the HBCUs had been targeted. Some of them have had to bring in consultants to help get the situation rectified. The majority of them had to end up paying for the ransomware. Lincoln College could not pay for the ransomware, so instead they shut down. So this really motivated us to have this webinar where we could really focus on how we provide security foundation trainings, how to build a secure network where you don't have the issues of cybersecurity and threats, and then also talk about just some of the benefits and the incentives. But we want to make sure that this webinar is very educational and that you walk away with a solution. And we're trying to build a long-term relationship with our clients to make sure that we prevent these attacks. So we're trying to be very proactive versus reactive. In this slide, we go into, HBCUs, community colleges, and state universities are at a greater risk. I am also a proud graduate of an HBCU, Florida A&M University. That's where I went for my undergrad. But in grad school, I went to Cornell University. Very different. The resources are different. The funding is very different. It was like night and day versus the resources FAMU had versus the resources that Cornell University had. So a lot of times, HBCUs, community colleges, and state universities, they're dependent on federal funding, grants, and also the students getting certain grants and federal funding. So the Department of Education has recently updated IT security requirements. So institutions of higher education must follow recent federal NIST compliant requirements. So protecting student information is a priority. And we are going to talk later on about how we can help you get access to some of that funding to make sure your network is up to date on those standards. Schools that do not have a secure IT risk you have the risk of losing federal dollars. So that's the other issue. And that was one of the reasons why Lincoln went ahead and closed, because they were losing the funding to keep their doors open. So, you're talking about the direct subsidized, unsubsidized Stafford loans, the direct plus loans, Pell grants, all the supplemental educational grants as well, and personal loans. More than 75% of HBCU students rely on Pell grants, and that's similar for a lot of the state and community colleges as well. They are very high. If they're not at 75%, they're more like at 60, 65% of the institutions are using federal funds. And then a lot of them, I know a lot of the community colleges here in Atlanta also provide wraparound services, because you have a lot of adults who are parents with children that are going back to community colleges. So it's very important that these institutions invest in maintaining their infrastructure. So, next slide. The other important the other important initiative I wanted to point out, Microsoft's commitments to cybersecurity skill initiatives for both HBCUs and community colleges. They're currently in the process now of strengthening historically Black colleges and universities with their computer data science programs, campus initiatives, and partnerships, and curriculum development. They're currently collaborating with 181 community colleges across 44 states to provide accessible pathways into cybersecurity profession, hoping to recruit 250,000 professionals into the cybersecurity workforce. We do have a very severe shortage in the cybersecurity area, and so Microsoft and other technology companies see the recruitment at HBCUs, state colleges, and community colleges to bridge that gap. And then me as a partner, as a Microsoft Silver partner, I'm a part of the Black African American Growth Initiative, where Microsoft is investing in somewhere near $500 million over the next 3 years in order to strengthen my business, so I can therefore strengthen my community. And the other thing I wanted to point out, my company, Safe PC Solutions, we launched an ed tech division a couple of years ago to bridge the digital divide among women and people of color, as well as working with some of the local Native American communities, where we provide Microsoft certification in digital skilling training. Fortinet has done a lot of initiatives, particularly around cybersecurity training. You can access their sites, and they provide a lot of free resource training, but their employees have volunteered with the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center, a nonprofit that provides IT and connectivity solutions for free to communities affected by disaster. And also during the pandemic, ITDRC began an initiative to equip students and families in rural and unserved communities with free Wi-Fi hotspots. So those are just some of the important initiatives that, not only are we providing services in cybersecurity, we're also working towards improving the communities in which we live and which we serve. So as I was stating earlier, we have a new normal now. We 73% of employees, and meaning a large portion of the faculty, academic faculty, they want more flexible remote work options from home. Therefore, the security risks have increased dramatically. And we have Corey Lee here, who's the zero trust architecture, who will go into talking about how we're revamping or helping organizations revamp their whole networks to really figure out where anyone is who's related to that network by detecting their device, using multi-factor authentication to identify them as a user. And then, of course, just some of the economic uncertainties, particularly that people were facing during the pandemic, and currently, just now that we're, going into inflation, or possibly, I guess, we're in inflation right now. But the new normal really requires us to approach technology in a very different manner. So the challenges today. Hybrid work is a durable trend. People feel disconnected. There's a large burnout. There's a lot of applications out there. And we all know BYOD, bring your own device, is here to stay. And then these are just, some of the statistics that show the majority of people, and we know academic faculty, they want flexible workforce. So in terms of the cybersecurity challenges that we face, and I think most people in the audience, I know most of the CISOs, the IT directors, and operation managers are going through this daily. The surge of cyber attacks, the growth of, during the pandemic, the ransomware and the phishing attacks, the continued security vulnerabilities, the increase in the personal device use at home and not properly logging into a secure network and not even having your VPN network at home in a secure manner. The lack, I don't know if I was going to say the word lack of skilled personnel when it comes to sophistication of attacks, lack of education and training around when they're receiving a phishing email and to really identify what that is. Because basically at Lincoln College, it was a faculty member that opened up the wrong email. And that's how the ransomware came in there. And just imagine if that employee had been educated about this is what phishing is and this is what that email looks like. And then the other thing is keeping up to date with a lot of the privacy and the industry regulations as well, because the NIST framework and CMMC are continually being updated around compliance and security. The priorities right now for cybersecurity: keeping devices healthy and managed, making security everyone's job. So as I said before, making sure your staff is properly trained to recognize email phishing, properly securing home environments. We all know the growth with the Internet of Things is here to stay, as well as, of course, the BYOD, bring your own device policy. And then, of course, building networks based on zero trust. So these are the priorities and the focus currently right now. And so why is cybersecurity such a major concern for higher education? Here are the facts. 63% of all malware attacks were directed at educational organizations. They felt they were the most vulnerable because they felt that there was a lack of sophistication in their networks, and they knew they all had to continue working from home in order to stay mobile. 5.8 million plus malware attacks happened between August and September of 2021. And that's right before the fall when school's about to get started, school is about to be engaged, and there's a lot going on between the parents, the faculty, and the students, and the administration. So this is the perfect time for a ransom attack. 90% of higher education institutions do not protect students and faculty from phishing, let alone educate them about what is phishing. 41% of higher education cybersecurity incidents were caused by social engineering. So there's a lot of social media activity going on, maybe a little bit too much social media activity going on. So in order to protect your users, your devices, and data, these are some of the things that are the focus and that are very critical. Streamline security and identity management of students and faculty. Protect student and faculty data at home and on campus. Defend institutional assets from cybercrime. And we have another session we can dig deeper into institutional assets and how those should be backed up and compliance. Maximize physical campus safety and health for the entire community. So those are some of the things that we feel that are important. I'm going to turn this now over to Corey Lee of Microsoft, who's going to go a lot more into depth around how Microsoft delivers end-to-end security. Are you ready, Corey?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Medina.
You're
And
welcome.
just just echoing some of the things that you've stated already, just setting the stage here. We know that as we're looking at this new normal and talking about resilience as part of that new normal, it means that we're really looking to get very hyper focused on what exactly does our digital estate look like. What are the types of assets that we have in our environment? Everything from endpoints to SaaS applications to cloud infrastructure to data that is moving in and out of the environment. You mentioned BYOD as well as things like Internet of Things or IoT devices. As we've seen environments in schools and institutions really look to modernize on behalf of some of the blended learning, hybrid learning scenarios, both as part of COVID as well as post-COVID. We are in the midst of a lot of digital transformation activity happening within higher education. Now, with that comes scenarios where we really want to be able to focus on how does security modernization align to our digital transformation efforts. And what this really gets to is something that Medina talked about is building with zero trust in mind. And oftentimes that starts with really knowing, once again, our digital estate and being able to focus on how do we ensure we have visibility across our environment to not just know our assets, know our critical accounts, but be in a position where we also know the hygiene associated with those critical assets. So, as we start to look across that digital estate, as I mentioned, everything from what are we doing to not just protect against ransomware, but if for whatever reason we were not able to effectively prevent a user from clicking on a link that they did not understand could be malicious prior to clicking on it, what are we doing after that link is clicked? How are we getting insight into activity that's happening within the environment before something gets critical? We know that things like ransomware attacks they're not just a single event. It doesn't involve just a single set of activity in the environment. Oftentimes, these attackers, they leave breadcrumbs. They're executing a series of things in the environment to include, doing things like scanning and understanding what accounts are actually highly privileged, gaining access to things like backups, gaining access to things that maybe represent sensitive data within the environment, mostly for the purpose of being able to do things like be prepared for a double extortion or an opportunity where they can really increase the likelihood that an institution pays a ransom because they maybe have data that's sensitive or important to that institution. So with that, we very much want to focus on how do we help education institutions, HBCUs, community colleges really start to expand the coverage that they have across their digital estate and do that in a way that not just attacks some of those compliance requirements, but also provides end-to-end security. So with that, we have a lot of conversations that tend to revolve around this current conversation of trust. And you may hear this term zero trust that gets thrown out there. But the reality is, as we look to map to what end users are looking for as part of some of the modernization that's happening, working remotely, having a flexible work lifestyle, being able to use their own personal device. Many of the controls from a security perspective have to be adaptable, have to be able to support some of those scenarios to really allow the institutions to do what they do best. So these are three main areas that we really want to get focused on, ensuring that we're very much focused on least privilege, that we're ensuring that we understand where data lies and what the level of sensitivity may be around that data. And we're using and leveraging intelligence to be able to help us automate things that support being able to prevent bad things from going from low risk to high risk within an environment. We feel like there's some very targeted things that can be done to really help accelerate this in our education customer landscape. So Medina, I know this topic comes up maybe a lot, but as we talk about least privilege and what that really means, and we talk about things like verify explicitly, uh, what this really gets to the core of is as we move away from what historically has been considered as implicit trust, meaning when something gets on the network, there's a binary decision that's made. Something that's on the network either has all up access to do what they want to do once they've joined the network, or they don't have access to the network. So once I'm on the network, we've seen a shift of focusing on we want to be able to verify explicitly what users and individuals and devices are doing on the network after they've joined the network. And it doesn't stop the fact that you got stopped at the front door. We very much want to focus on insider threat as part of this verify explicitly scenario. So, an example being, if I have an admin who, for all intents and purposes, they have permissions to manage an Active Directory environment or some other resource within the environment, just because they're an admin doesn't mean that that admin doesn't need to be monitored. In every ransomware attack that we see, generally speaking, some type of elevated credential or permission, an admin account, is involved in that attack, meaning somehow the attacker was able to gain that level of permission and access and then act as if they were that admin or leverage the permissions associated with that admin. So as we look to very focused on monitoring admin activity, this is where explicit verification becomes a key area of focus to help with detecting those insider threat scenarios that are part of these attacks that escalate quickly. In addition to that, we know we've seen in a number of scenarios that prior to a ransomware uh, payload being executed in an environment, there's some activity that tends to precede that ransomware payload being executed. And generally speaking, that activity involves some form of data leaving the environment. So this indicates when we have a scenario where we're maybe not necessarily focused on protecting data intentionally or monitoring how data is moving across an environment, we may not have the ability to early stage detect that there could be a ransomware attack that maybe hasn't been carried out yet, but could be in the process of being executed within the environment. So one big area of focus that we want to make sure it starts to jump to the forefront is what exactly we're doing to get closer towards the data that's processed and analyzed in an environment, to protect that data, but more importantly, to monitor where that data is going so that when there are signals or signs of a potential ransomware attack that could be uh, gearing up, that we can get some of that insight and hopefully be able to intervene prior to things getting to a point where impact has been realized that's critical. In addition to that, we've talked a little bit about the hygiene conversation, just simply knowing what's the state of affairs today. What are my blind spots? Where are those areas that represent the most risk? So a lot of focus around driving more insight around the state of the environment and the current posture to be able to highlight where there may be vulnerabilities, where there may be weak points, and where there may be areas of optimization that can support scenarios where the environment can be more resilient to something that's happening. So as we talk a lot about these secure score conversations or these posture conversations, very much focused on how do we improve hygiene and how do we limit the attack surface, if you will, that exists for attackers to get into an environment, and furthermore, for them to expand and increase the impact that they look to cause maybe on behalf of some of the modern attacks that we're seeing today. So I think, Medina, you kind of touched on this earlier, but as you start to focus on the mix between how do we handle what our end users are looking for, the types of experiences that they want, and we create less friction on behalf of impacting end user experience while trying to tighten the reins or improve security within the environment, we oftentimes see a convergence where as we start to take an approach that looks to build upon those zero trust foundations that Medina called out earlier, the ability for us to be able to strike that balance around how do we provide more intelligent and rich end user experiences, but still keep in place the guardrails that are necessary to ensure that we have the appropriate level of security coverage within the environment, once again, to help with some of that proactive security around security threats or attacks that could target an HBCU, community college, or any entity within the education sector. So when we break down this conversation of how do we do that, um, there are lots of capabilities and solutions that tend to come into play on this front, but we know that in every environment, end users have to be productive. They have to be able to collaborate. They have to be able to execute on the requirements of their job and their job functions. In many cases, this involves users leveraging devices to not just access services like M365, but also to access various other applications, LMS solutions, student information system services, various other applications within the environment that really are core to the way in which the school operates. But what comes along for the ride is in every access scenario, as we say, there's always some type of identity at the core of access. There's also some type of device, right, at the core of access. And everything in between, to include the network they're using, oftentimes surrounds that access scenario. So as we look at many of the modernization activities that have been happening, many environments have been modernizing around what they do around collaboration, what they do around end user productivity services, as well as how they manage devices. As we talk about BYOD and things of that nature, how exactly, what is our BYOD program? How are we offering up BYOD services? But more importantly, what are we doing to handle and manage our faculty devices? Are we doing this in a way that supports users being able to have a rich experience, but once again, getting things like core configuration deployed on those devices that support some of those baseline security scenarios that are critical to powering the experiences that are desired. Even beyond that, things like sustainability and accessibility and security that also underpin those experiences are outcomes that many customers are looking to ensure that they can meet, right? So even if there are classes or individuals that are involved in um, scenarios where, once again, they need tools that are accessible and they need tools that really can meet the needs of scenarios where they may not necessarily be in a position to use everything the way in which every other user may use it. How are we adapting to those scenarios and making available the capabilities that can meet those needs? So when we bring it all home, we know that in many cases, as Medina mentioned, uh, there are degrees of institutions and community college systems and HBCUs that may have varying levels of resources. And as Medina mentioned, also the cyber skills shortage that we're experiencing right now, where in many cases the barrier is having to be lowered with respect to how we make available security solutions and what it means to operate and maintain those security solutions over time. So as we look to ensure that services that are made available can be enabled out of the box and provide capabilities that support rapid deployments, that support the ability for folks to get up to speed with training on capabilities that, once again, aren't difficult to get deployed, but are simple to configure, maintain over time. A very big focus area to ensure that as things evolve, institutions of a wide range of sizes, and shapes, if you will, have the ability to use the tools available in a way that supports meaningful progress as it pertains to maturing the security posture, as well as just simply having an operationally mature environment that can be supported over time. Device management, I won't go and bleed that one, but we've seen an uptick in device management being a huge focus area as part of the post-COVID world. And part of this is because, once again, the uptick in BYOD devices increased as boundaries look to be expanded as part of hybrid and blended learning. But with this comes scenarios where the ability to put more guardrails around devices that once again now are being shipped directly to end users, to faculty, to staff. But as they're being shipped directly to those end users, the ability for devices to go through out-of-box experiences that have been hardened before they actually got to the end user. So as we're thinking about creating those secure baselines, as we're thinking about ensuring we can detect when devices have maybe shifted from a state where the device is healthy, but is now unhealthy, the ability to leverage some of those device management capabilities to bubble up some of that information, and in many cases automate the ability for institutions to respond to emerging threats or to scenarios where there's configuration drift and now they're exposed to potentially more risk. So the ransomware conversation is one of my I would say one of the most exciting topics I like to talk about, and it's partially because for a long time, ransomware was really viewed as a thing that was for the most part opportunistic, meaning an attacker would come in and opportunistically they would look to encrypt something in the environment with the hopes of uh, creating a scenario where they could collect a ransom. But what we've seen over the past 3 to 5 years or so is that ransomware has very much shifted from being an opportunistic attack to a targeted attack. Now, what does that mean? What that means is at the point in which a ransomware attack uh, is observed in an environment, meaning things have been encrypted, there have been a few things that have changed in how attackers may look to carry out this attack. One of which is uh, oftentimes these attackers are in the environment for upwards of 200 or more days, in many cases, before they're ever detected. And what that indicates is these attackers have some form of access where they're moving around, they're learning the environment, they're performing activities that are low. We'll call it a uh, low focus, meaning someone may not be detecting what they're actually doing, but they look to carry out these stages in a series of steps over some period of time. At which point, we are looking to ensure that those types of stages can be elevated to customers before they get to a point where they're critical. And we can shift away from just simply looking at pure events, pure activities like user who fell prey to a phishing email, or user who had some type of malware on a device, or user that showed some type of suspicious activity where they started taking or moving data out of the environment, but to connect the dots across those events and activities and bubble them up as we know that there is an active ransomware campaign being carried out in your environment. Effectively telling the story and showcasing that not only are these breadcrumbs being detected in the environment in terms of activity that's being observed, but there's an opportunity to go and intervene once again before those activities get to a critical state. So something that's referred to as defender ransomware detection, where the ability to take lots of insight and signal from the environment, detect those various activities that would be carried out in sequence, and then raise them up to someone in the environment for the purpose of being able to either investigate or trigger something like an automated response that can go and help with the remediation once again before this particular scenario got to a critical state. Another capability or solution, if you will, that's coming to the table is we're seeing in lots of environments, whether it be by way of meeting cyber insurance requirements. So for every environment that's coming up on things like cyber insurance policy renewals, you may or may not if you're not a recipient of that policy and maybe aware of that activity around that policy, there's something referred to as a ransomware supplemental application that is typically accompanying the cyber insurance policy. Historically, ransomware was included as part of most cyber insurance policies, and it wasn't necessarily looked at as a separate type of attack or a separate thing that needed to be insured for. But now what we're seeing in the industry is just based on the uptick in cybersecurity attacks, specifically ransomware attacks, being targeted, looking to cause maximum impact, and cyber insurance companies paying, in many cases, maximum payout. That now this need to have 24/7 coverage or a security incident event management solution has been elevated. So beyond just those financial scenarios, we're also seeing a use case where many environments are suffering from the fact that they don't have a single location to be able to see all of the things that are happening in the environment. So they're spending lots of time moving between capabilities and tools and dashboards, looking for a needle in the haystack, only to realize that they're losing time with respect to being able to detect and respond to many of the most impactful events and attacks that they could be more resilient to. So with that, a solution referred to.
So,
Go
so
ahead.
Corey, real quickly, is that solution the Azure Centennial ransomware monitoring? Is that
That is correct. So
okay? Okay.
that solution
And
has.
that
Yep.
and is that being required from the site for when they get the cybersecurity insurance? Is
So
that
great question.
okay?
In the insurance policy, there's a question that may ask, do you have a SIEM solution, or SIEM, or security incident and event solution? Question mark. And then typically there's a follow-on question that states, do you have 24/7 monitoring? Now, all of that tends to combine and mean, do I have something that's seeing what it needs to see across the entire environment, not just focused on looking at the network or identity stuff or device stuff or application stuff? This is something seeing everything, and then is someone at the wheel to be able to see the things that is being detected across the environment. So that's where that 24/7 monitoring exists, because we know in some of these attacks, if something triggers an alert at 5 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning, and we don't have personnel that's monitoring at 3 a.m. because we don't have staff that's working around the clock, this 24/7 monitoring conversation helps with, if something happened at 3 a.m., we have the ability to quickly automate something or respond to that without it happening during a time where we really weren't available to respond. And we like to say, some cases, these attacks, it's a combination of, can we respond in minutes or hours, right? But something happening 3 hours ago and not knowing about it until 9 a.m., that can be the difference between something being low impact or high impact. So I'll wrap up here, but there are some practical things that every institution can do. Everything from ensuring that we're prepared if for whatever reason there were a ransomware attack, and we know that files maybe got encrypted in an environment. What are we doing to ensure that the recovery of those files can be as expedient as possible, and that we can actually recover them safely? A large number of schools that get hit by ransomware attacks aren't able to actually recover the information that's encrypted, even after they pay the ransom payment. So this is really about, how are we leveraging cloud storage? How are we leveraging more intelligent ways to recover files and backups so that the recovery phase is strong? And these are pre-breach things that can happen, as well as what can we do on devices, things that we can do to harden those devices. There are things built into things like Windows 10, Windows 11 to help limit the attack surface and prevent things from happening on devices that really are not normal. So something referred to as attack surface reduction rules, where there are rules built specifically to help intervene and in many cases prevent things like ransomware activity from happening on an endpoint. Uh, in addition to that, other capabilities on devices, one thing that's also called out in insurance policies, something referred to as endpoint detection and response, or EDR, right? This is a capability that typically runs on an endpoint and looks for bad behavior. So it's not just looking at malware that's been seen before, which typically is done through signature. It's also looking at 0 days, things that have never been seen before that maybe were derived from some other type of malware. Right. So this is about getting, once again, leveraging more intelligence and getting to a point where we can see the things that we need to see that maybe haven't been seen before. And then lastly, as we start to talk about moving towards things that can really help bring us to the forefront, this is really about, I love to call, being serious about behavioral analytics. And this is all about detecting insider threat. Right. We can't always expect that the people within the environment with the highly privileged permissions are doing all the right things. Why? Because we know with credential theft being a huge, we'll call it stage as part of a ransomware attack, we know that at some point in a ransomware event, someone with highly privileged permissions will be doing something that they shouldn't have been doing with those permissions. So the ability to use behavioral analytics to detect that, once again, through EDR functionality, through other insider threat monitoring solutions, extremely impactful.
Thank you, Corey, for contributing to this conversation. We really appreciate your time and the knowledge that you shared with us. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Medina, so that we can continue with this conversation.
Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate this. So we wanted to also, during this presentation, talk about the Surface portfolio that Microsoft currently has. A lot of reason why we're pushing Surface as the device because of the challenges we're having with BYOD, where we are already recommending to our clients that with the Surface devices, you're able to deploy more of a zero trust model. So those are just some of the things that we've been emphasizing to our clients so they can identify the devices properly on when a user, be it the academic faculty or the student, when they access their environment. So we want to just, briefly, highlight the Surface portfolio. Okay, so every organization security journey is different. And currently, we're working in environments where we're trying to figure out how do we ultimately optimize the network for a hybrid work environment. And a lot of that is if they're connecting to the on-prem, making sure that we identify those systems for the cloud, because in this hybrid workforce model now, as you know, Microsoft 365 is in the cloud. It is it's backed up by Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud services. But at the same time, we know that in traditional higher education, they're still running very traditional networks, and now have more of a hybrid model where they're still using their networks in the data center, but a lot of the application, the data files have now migrated to the cloud. So so that was, that's the second step. But since we've integrated Microsoft 365 with the cloud, how do we allow Azure Active Directory to really secure and to really leverage the security and access of the applications? And how do we identify each user, that type of thing? And then rolling out around secure policies, around different access, making sure we enroll the devices, update to the latest platforms, as well as Microsoft 365. I also want to point out that if you are using Apple, the Microsoft Intune solution does manage, which is a mobile device management solution where they do manage the Apple and the Mac products as well too. And then, and as you deploy Office and the productivity apps, how do you make sure everyone is backing up the data utilizing OneDrive, and then also the data migration, and then leveraging all the other Microsoft products such as Teams and Chat. So this is just a security journey, high level. Everyone is at different stages. But one of the things that we, offer in a part of our services is really look at where your security journey is today. And one of the case studies we wanted to emphasize in this presentation was Microsoft was very successful in working with Robert Ekman, who serves as the CISO at Kent State University, in terms of strengthening their infrastructure to prevent cybersecurity threats. So one of the things that Microsoft was able to successfully do was really make sure that social engineering was under control, phishing, and as Corey Lee went really more into depth on ransomware. And just so you all know, recently Microsoft Defender has even become more robust as a cybersecurity solution as well. And we'll talk about the Microsoft security training when we highlight benefits. I do want to begin to transition this to Mike Laura of Fortinet, who is the director for education for the state and local government for Fortinet. And he is going to talk about what Fortinet does, but also how they have successfully created a solution around it's the cybersecurity threat assessment program. And there are 3 key areas around network and firewall security, email security, SD-WAN, and he's going to go a lot more into depth and talk about that. And he's also, I know we have a question regarding the funding already, and he's gonna talk a little bit about that as well. So Mike, are you ready?
Yeah, let's roll. Thanks, guys. This is great so far. One thing I want to kind of echo back to that Corey mentioned is a lot of what we talk about when we're on our cybersecurity journey is we have to be able to identify things, right? So identity is a very key aspect, obviously in the NIST framework, but also in just in anything we do. And really from Fortinet's perspective, from what we do, we've been around for a long time, since 2000. But what we see where we provide value in education space outside of just our standard network security play, but even partnering with Microsoft and with SafePC really comes down to this assessment side frame of we're kind of here to provide that doctor's second opinion, if you will. That's really what we see this going from here. Now, we could talk about security assessments. One thing I want to really point out to echo some of the dynamics, and even you kind of see on the screen here, there's a few, just these are just blanket vanilla reports, if you will, of what they would look like from an executive summary and kind of breakouts. But education is very, very, very unique. And you saw some of that earlier in the presentation when it came to just some of the statistics and facts. I mean, looking overall towards things, just a couple things that we see from FortiGuard Labs, education has about 26,492 vulnerabilities per day compared to other markets that only see about 12,000. So you're seeing double that. And that other markets is the average of that telecom, that insurance, financial industries. Education is just crazy. And that's because of especially in higher ed, that open, inclusive, just network that has to be built and maintained to foster the different learning relationships that are there. Mandita called it out very well, and so did Corey. Just looking at the SaaS applications, the infrastructure as a service applications that are used, they're more than double compared to other agencies. So it's always good to have a snapshot, and that's what we do here at Fortinet. That's what we're partnering with SafePC and Microsoft to do. Is we want to be able to provide an assessment, throw it where it sits behind your existing security controls, and be able to give you guys a snapshot that will help not only say, hey, can I can I maybe stretch my network upgrade a little bit longer? Do I need to go and go out and buy some more physical hardware? Can I focus a little bit more on getting to zero trust? Can I focus a little bit more on doing multi-factor authentication? Can I focus a little bit more on, I have a limited amount of funds and services, where do I need to apply them? And then also what the snapshot ends up doing is it ends up giving you something that's broken down, not just for technical folks, but something you can hand to possibly a CISO or a higher up that say, hey, this is where my challenges are today. So that's what the snapshot gives you there. I'll go ahead and Brandon, let you go to kind of the next slide, because I think there's a few other ones here. We have 3 of them. I don't have to go through all of them and all the slides. I'll just kind of focus in on this one. But the next gen firewall is kind of our bread and butter. We've been doing firewalls forever, right? But for the most part, what it's going to end up giving you is these assessments give you a cover page. They give you an assessment of what it was. They're going to give you a report generation. You're going to be able to put your guys' logo on it as well. I mean, it's a nice, very nice thing. But it has and includes this executive summary, which gives you kind of outlines of key findings, prioritization of report, and it's only going to really prioritize things that are, really big call outs. And by that, what I mean is it's going to focus on, like I said, you have 24,000 application abuses happening every day. It's going to call those things out. It's going to call out the security risk of malware that could possibly be on the network. Things like that give you just a really big high overlay, but it's also going to see where you stack up where else within maybe possibly the education region, or where you stack out amongst organizations of your size. So it gives you something that you can use, but then also you can give to maybe somebody as a technology leader, higher up, CFO, somebody like that, to help provide justification for doing things that you need to do with your budget. Outside of that, there's going to be some visualizations where there's a mini section broken down. You're going to be able to see that productivity, that utilization. Those visualizations are going to be able to call out, specific, what we consider maybe high risk applications or exploits. And then ultimately the recommendations come after that. So we don't just tell you a bunch of stuff. We're going to try to give you some recommendations to say, hey, this is how you can maybe step up, and give it on a graded scale of saying, you know what, here's a 5 being you need to get this taken care of today, to here's a 1, but you don't need to get that taken care of. So that's what the security assessment is going to end up doing. It's going to give you kind of the tools to go ahead and say, this is where I'm starting from. So now where can I transition into that journey that Medina just talked about? Because ultimately we want to get you guys to the most secure state as possible, because you guys have information, people, obviously next generation that we're trying to keep going, learning and just doing the right thing for, right? So we're going to help you provide a baseline so that you can go ahead and jump off and go from there. And again, the key point towards that is going to be, it's just a tool that hopefully that can help you utilize to show the value that's there. And Medina, I'll go ahead and we'll just take the funding question when we go to the Q&A part. We'll just go from there. That's good with you. I'll hand it back.
Okay. What I also, before we get into our Q&A, we want to emphasize that there is assistance for higher education. It's called HERF, HEERF. It's the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, which assists with broadband, IT infrastructure, and cybersecurity. So, and we also been doing some research. State colleges, community colleges, HBCUs are not clearly taking advantage of those funding resources, and we can assist you. Just the information Mike just went over, the complimentary cybersecurity threat protection assessments. As a Fortinet partner, they send out the device. We, as a technical support team, we install the device, and basically we run a report on your network vulnerabilities. If we decide to do an email assessment, that's where we get into the phishing, what type of phishing challenges, and then also the SD-WAN assessments, and they're complimentary. So we need you to take advantage of them being complimentary. We need you to take advantage of funding that you need to apply to, because if you don't apply, you lose the funding. Then we all heard Brandon today. We all how wonderful he is. He's a part of the Microsoft training team. One of the other things that the audience is gonna get, and all the people who registered, is you're gonna get a recording on security foundation training, where they're gonna show you some of the latest and the greatest on security training. We have special education pricing on Surface and OEM devices. So in other words, you're not paying the regular retail pricing, and it includes some of the device management and other secure features. So for further inquiries, you can email me, Medina Ali, at msali at safepcsolutionsusa.com, and we'll drop it into the general chat so everyone can have my email address. We're also going to be sending out an assessment questionnaire to all the attendees, and of course, our support team will be, sending out, setting up appointments as well, so we can make sure we're addressing all of your needs. So let's, we only have about, we only have about 10 more minutes, and I would like for us to go into the Q&A. I'm sorry about that. Brandon, I guess you need to be handling, I need to stop touching the screen.
No problem.
So,
I can jump into that for you here
okay.
really quick. I do have some of those questions here. And once again, I do want to thank you, Mike. Thank you, Medina. Thank you, Corey, for contributing to this conversation and really just getting us started here with this. This is not going to be the last time we have this discussion, but this is a great way to kickstart us and get us going in the right direction. We thank you all for joining us. So we will jump into our Q&A section here. There was a question that I'll answer here myself. So we are recording this session and it will be made available to everyone who registered. So if you do have someone who maybe they weren't able to join us live, they will have the opportunity to watch the replay for this. And also the Security Foundations training that Medina mentioned will also be made available to you all as an additive. So you have additional training that you all can share with your colleagues in order to be up to date on your security. Now, the next question we have, are there grants or funding for campuses to secure college campuses? Would any of you like to jump in on that?
I can go ahead and start with that one if you like. Yes, and yes to that. As Medina mentioned, the Higher Education Relief Fund is actually still sitting open. It looks like it was actually supposed to close June of this year, but there was a 1-year extension brought back in April that ended up allowing the extension of use because there were still a lot of funds that were not utilized. There's still a lot of questions. This is very common even in the K through 12 realm with ESSER. This is a very broad program. It allows for a lot of use of funds. As I've seen, and I deal with this daily, if not hourly, for just institutions across the nation, even some of our island institutions as well, because we have some HBCUs down in like the Virgin Islands, right?
Yes.
There is still a lot of lack of understanding because this is a very broad bill. But to answer a couple questions here, HBCUs, minority serving institutions, still have a lot of institutional funds. It's usually broken up, funding is usually broken up into 3 buckets, if you will. There's the student fund, which cannot be touched, that goes towards financial aid. There's the institutional side of the fund, which can be utilized for anything technology related to help stop the spread of COVID. That includes increasing the use of distance learning. That includes modernization of technology to keep that education and all information secure from point A to point Z. And point Z in this case can be a device. So that allows for, there was another question, hey, does this funding allow for use of endpoint? Under HERF, yes, you can buy, for the cases of what we just saw here, you could buy Surface devices and fund those through the HERF funds that are there. You can utilize, if you need firewalls, I'd love for you guys, of course, pick Fortinet towards that, but you can utilize that, anything that comes towards there. Any of the solutions that were talked about here for cybersecurity, HERF does allow for that. So that is a great program. If you need to know where that question sits at, reach out to Safe PC Solutions. We will help Medina find out where that is, find out where those funds are at, and help you guys not just give you, hey, this is what you have left, but realize that the HERF funds were already given to the institutions. You guys have that sitting in there. Now it's the conversation of how do we help lobby, help empower you to lobby so that you guys can get those funds and provide.
Okay.
And don't just make it small for your IT. We can try to draw it towards a larger conversation. I've seen some institutions, and I'll be quiet after this point. I've seen some institutions really tie in the fact that they want to get transport and community-based transport and community-based health outside of maybe colleges and institutions,
Yeah.
and they want to be able to track that, but then they can also put their spend in on cybersecurity because they want to get all that information protected, get it going into their SIM, get some AI, ML, behavior analytics on there, and they pay for the whole thing through that use case. So it's very possible. People are doing it. There's a lot of good use cases out there. HERF is definitely still available for that, and please use it because you have till June 30th of this year if you have that. Again, if you need help, reach out to Safe PC Solutions, and we forward that, and everybody else will help get that information there for sure. There are a few other funds real quick that's announced towards here. It just came out, IIJA, the infrastructure bill that came out. There is the Cybersecurity SLCG grant that's there. School districts and colleges are considered community anchor institutions. Even churches, in some cases, are considered community anchor institutions, which is very big. So what that allows for is competitive-based grants, but that will cover cybersecurity funds. A couple, it's based on the state. It's going to go through the DHS FEMA state office that you have at your state. You have to go through the state-based cybersecurity team that is there set up, and you have to follow the rules that are going to be set up for your state. But it is a 90-10% match, meaning that if you are going by yourself as an individual, you have a 90% that the federal government, if you win, will pay for. Say $100,000 will pay for 90. You've got to match $10,000 of that. So that's one that's available. We'll know more November 15th. And then on top of that, there are always yearly funds that deal with cybersecurity and just towards modernization a lot, but really focus on cybersecurity. What we're talking about here, there is the nonprofit. If you're a nonprofit institution, there's a nonprofit NGSP program. It's through Homeland Security, nonprofit security program that you can get. If you are an actual public institution, there are the SHGP funds as well that come from them. And usually every state gets, depending on what's there. I happen to know Georgia and Florida because I do a lot of work with folks down there. They usually get around $9 to $10 million a year that could be put out. Again, competitive-based funds, but if you're looking for, I need help, I need $100,000, I need $1 million or something like that. If you have a good enough use case towards it, it's something that's there, and that is on the yearly. So those are ones that are cybersecurity specific. I'll go ahead and stop there because there's usually DOE specific ones, but I'll stop and let someone else jump in.
Okay, really quick, Mike, just a quick follow-up here. Is there funding available for nonprofit EDU sectors as well?
Yes,
Yes.
there is. So that's a really good one. Medina probably knows a little bit more regionally than I do, but one of the things that I will make mention is Homeland Security always has that around security. They have that nonprofit security grant. And again, that is very open, wide. Schools, churches, nonprofit education institutions, they can apply for those things.
The challenge is, and is that they're not applying.
Yes.
The funds are there, they're not applying. That was Chuck Booker of Morris Brown College, which is an HBCU in Atlanta, that just got all of their credentials restored, and now they qualify for all of this funding, and they just were not aware, and that's been the challenge. And even the community colleges, even the state colleges, they're just not applying for the funds. And also for the nonprofit sector, I actually have a grant management process person on my team that works for SafePC, Gwendolyn Reese. And once we get the grant information, we actually help write it and put it together for the institution. And she helps put together our technology budgets, and she works closely with our technology team and to make sure we have the right quotes and the right financial information around the equipment. So again, you all, please take advantage of the resources.
Perfect. Now we are coming up on time. We have about 30 more seconds, so we do want to be respectful of everyone's situation, work schedule, their time. So if you do need to jump in the next 20 seconds or so, we do thank you for joining us. If you have a few moments to stick around, we do have two more questions that we will honor. The first one is going to be for Corey. Can you use Windows Defender with other EPPs?
Great question. And I'll do a little bit of a name clarification because this always happens with Microsoft technologies that get named similar similar to one another. So we have what historically has been looked at as Defender antivirus, or what was previously referred to as Windows Defender antivirus, which, you know, in most cases, only one antivirus solution can actually operate authoritatively on a device, and that's to prevent conflicts. So on the EPP side of the house, you know, you have the ability to use Windows Defender antivirus. It's built into Windows 10. But if you want to use another antivirus solution, you can do that. It's just, you know, one would have to be authoritative, you know, so you have to give one of them the ability to do its thing. There's another capability we refer to as Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Now, where this is different is if you're using a separate antivirus solution today, you can marry up Windows Defender for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint with that antivirus solution. The difference is antivirus sits into that EPP layer, or Endpoint Platform Protection layer. Defender for Endpoint fits into that EDR layer, or Endpoint Detection and Response solution. So it can be used alongside of other antivirus capabilities, and it's really meant to cover down on next generation AV, so detecting 0 days, or helping you to simply monitor and detect malicious activity on the device that's, you know, based on abnormal behavior. So.
Thank you so much. That was a really great response there. And our last question, I'll toss up to either Mike or Medina. What about I'm guessing NP is standing for nonprofit employment agencies. So are there fundings for nonprofit employment agencies?
Yes, it is. It's for the workforce development. So any of those nonprofit employment agencies that are doing training around cybersecurity, any type of IT certification, any type of Microsoft certification, they will get the funding, because remember, they're trying to employ and get people into IT jobs. So yes, there is funding for, particularly for nonprofits that are in employment, but it's under workforce development.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so we are going to cut our question section at this point. We are a few minutes over time. Once again, we do thank you, Medina. We thank you, Mike. We thank you, Corey, for contributing here. And we thank you all for joining us. We hope that you share this webinar with your colleagues, share them with anyone you know in the cybersecurity community, or at an HBCU, state college, or community college. And with that, we will be closing out today's webinar. Have a great day, everyone.